Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the best darn show on the internet, the Over Sharon Show. We have a guest today. We're very excited about it. But before we get into that, I'm going to read today's quote, and then Sharon is going to pull a card for us. Today's quote is, "Mankind is made of two kinds of people, wise people who know they're fools, and fools who think they are wise." And that is by Socrates.
Or Socrates.
Or
So
Socrates. Yes, Bill and Ted's.
Excellent Adventure. I
Yeah.
don't think I ever saw those.
How dare you?
The first one was great when I was 12.
Yeah, exactly.
The Knight of Swords.
Ooh,
Everything is mental. Huh.
I like that.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pin you so we could see that. Oh yeah. I like this because it I mean, it not only does it represent air because it's a sword, but it's an action card. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like you have this idea and you're going forth in the world and you're trying to show people your idea and showcase it. And I feel like that's kind of what we do here on the show. So I think it works out pretty well.
Yeah, it has a strong Aquarian vibe.
Ooh. And you're an Aquarius on we'll
I'm on the
talk about that
cusp.
maybe. Okay.
So I'm in that there's only one void on the plane ecliptic, and I'm right in the middle of it. It's right between Aquarius and Pisces.
Okay. Sweet. Well, without further ado, we have Topher Gardner, which I'm sure many of you who listen to our show know who he is. And we'd like to talk about a variety of topics because I've been listening to his podcast and a lot of cool things get sprinkled in there. So, but I would like him to tell us, as he does to his guests, about his childhood, how he grew up, what his spiritual journey was like, how it led him to his current cosmology, and then we'll go from there.
Great. My name's Christopher Gardner. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I grew up in essentially the 80s in South Florida. So we had all the good, savings and loan scandal, all the good cocaine running, Miami Vice, that whole thing going on. And as a little kid, I didn't really know exactly what all that meant, but my dad was a commercial contractor who built skyscrapers. So it was a very volatile economy there. And it was wild because he was a very, talented person from a building perspective, but he got sucked in towards the more commercial end of building big buildings. And all the big buildings that were going up were all financially related, bank related. And so he would always give me these like little tidbits of like, you know, prodding that what was happening wasn't right, wasn't correct. My mother, on the other hand, was like dyed in the wool, go Team America, self-proclaimed WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant woman. She ended up leaving my dad and married, from her perspective, married up and moved to the east side of town. And so I got to watch, I got to live through like the working class contractor uh, way of life because I live with my dad, and then I got to see like the uber wealthy, the very privileged upper crust of society, and I figured out quite quickly I didn't like either of them. um, in human design, I'm a 6'2". I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that's like
Barely.
the hermit role model. So
Okay.
um, I always kind of straddle the fence. Like my whole thing, even in sports, I was very talented artist, but I got into really liking women, and I chose sports because there were a lot more girls, at least the girls that I was attracted to, that were into athletes than they were into artists. So I went the athletic route, but even at that, I was sort of like a fringy person. I never did anything the way I was supposed to. Apparently, I'm ODD. I'm oppositionally defiant, they call it a disorder. I don't think it's a disorder, but I just have this, I've always had this notion of like, if people are pushing, if the crowd is going one way, um, don't do that. And my dad always used to say that. My dad always used to be like, be a leader, not a follower. If 100 people are doing it and it's not right, don't do it. And so I kind of just I had that ingratiated in my spirit. And as most artists are, I've always was a natural artist. I just had a lot of willpower to do the athletic stuff. And but like most artists, I was sort of rebellious towards any type of authority. And when I got into college and played college football at Michigan State, I really started to resent authority on the more macro level, in the sense that I was once you're a college athlete, you're essentially a pro athlete because you're making your university so much money. And back in the mid 90s, athletes weren't paid and we weren't allowed to work either. So I was a poor athlete that was making my university, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So, or I should say tens of millions of dollars if you look at it from the macro perspective. And I got to see how greedy the coaches were, and it was kind of cool. By age 18, I'd already really understood the inner workings of corporate America because I had a internship with American Express at age 17, and then I ended up playing college football and seeing just the machinations, like the whole the mechanism of the meat grinder of what college athletics was and how corporate it was, like how it was really geared towards money. And it was very interesting for me to watch because as felt like I was becoming more conscious of the system, I wanted less and less to do with it. So by my junior year, I had a really good junior year at Michigan State. I think I was second team All Big Ten, but the first team All Big Ten guy was All American. But statistically, I was better than he was. That year, though, I had like completely within myself, like completed whatever I needed to athletically. Like I was just like, I've had multiple girlfriends from this. I'd done everything I ever dreamt about. I never really dreamt about myself being a pro. And I felt complete. And then I also felt disgusted with my coaches. I really did not like my coaches because the way I move through life and the way I choose to work with the people that I work with, I positively reinforce people. And I believe in that side of things. And the majority of the coaches I was encountering, they worked with negative reinforcement, and they were deplorable people. And I have this thing in me with the second I find out that you're deplorable, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna kill myself for you. Like there's nothing, I'm not gonna do it. So anyway, the whole college thing happens. I have positive momentum. I end up playing in the Arena Football League for a few years. And the entire time I'm doing this, I'm not even liking football. I just have no real life skills. Like I graduated from Michigan State with a hospitality business and finance degree, and I have no skills, like none. I know how to kick a football. And I have a little idea that the world, is that me or you? Did you hear that beep?
I
Yeah,
heard
I
a
did
beep.
hear that.
Huh. Sorry about that. So anyway, I knew how to kick a football, and that was really about it. And it was kind of cool at Michigan State. We had a lot of professors that kind of turned me on to black flag operations. They could never say it was a black flag. They didn't use that terminology like back then. This is like 97, 98. But they would give us like on a chalkboard, they would like show the line of events, and then they would say, and then this happened. And like the big thing that like woke me up, I remember I was in this class called the history of U.S. foreign economic policy. And the professor was showing the chain of events that led to the Spanish-American War and the goodwill mission to Cuba and the Bay of Havana with the three warships that just exploded because of terrorists. And I remember I was just in class and I was like, it was Michigan State is a huge university. I was in a class of like 400 kids, and I'm like literally I'm on the edge of my seat, like, oh my God, the government did it. Like I felt all this like passion in my body, and I looked to all my peers,
And they
no
didn't
one
get it.
cared. No one gave a flippin' whatever. No one
Wow.
cared. And so I remember I went to my professor's office hours, and I was so passionate about it, and I wanted to know more and more and more that he invited me to where the professors that all taught economics, they would go to a local bar and have a beer. So I was just in there with these professors, and I would just be like asking question after question after question. And that was like my best experience at Michigan State, because a lot of these guys, they were foreign professors. And because Michigan State really, they loved the fact that they had so many foreign exchange students and so many foreign professors. And it really helped me to like kind of broaden my perspective and see things from a non-United States perspective. And so my last year at Michigan State, we really got into banking and we got into currency. And that blew my mind because the very last thing I was taught at university was like essentially money flows to where people are young, dumb, and full of cum. I mean, it's literally that. It's that simple. And so this was 1998, and our professors were saying like, okay, the average age of the Western world is this age. It's around 50 years old. The average age of Brazil, Russia, India, and China is this age. The bankers are going to shift everything to the BRIC countries. And this is 1998. So I have this in my background. I graduate from college. I have my parents going, oh, you could go work for American Express. You could go to Hyatt. You could be a country club manager. You could do this, this, and that. And I'm in the back of my mind being like, I hate all of that. And it's all going to burn. Like we're polishing brass on the Titanic. And and I was just like, no, I'm not doing that. Like none of that fits. And so I played in the Arena League, and I was always kind of a handsy person, in a good way. Like I would always in art, I like to sculpt. In my family, massage was like a very normal thing. And I just had a kinesiologist girlfriend that was like, hey, you should massage professionally. You're really good at it. And so I took her up on it, because as a field goal kicker in the Arena League, you work like maybe like 4 hours a week. So I had like a lot of time, a lot of discretionary income, and no overhead expenses. And I loved doing it. And it was kind of cool because I had an entree to actually working on people that were very highly developed, like people that knew their bodies really well. Because I started working on my teammates, and that gave me entree to like work on very, very wealthy people that had tons and tons of money. So they had already, it just brought me to a broader perspective of how to look at the body. What is I have a device that is thinking on its own over here. So it was really neat. I did that, and I got into the yoga world because that healed my back. I had lots of back pain from kicking, and I got into yoga. So the yoga and the massage, and I was like, the financial world as it's geared right now, it's terminal. And so I kind of was a few years early on that. But yeah, in my mind, I never associated money with wealth because like I said, being very, very exposed to very rich people at a young age, I saw how miserable they were. And so that really just kind of drove me into my spiritual path. And I had always had supernatural experiences. It was not something that was shunned in my family. And when I say shunned, it was actually something like my dad had extrasensory perception, my mother had extrasensory perception. My
Was there any religious background? Your sister too?
um my sister did too. Well, like I said, my mom was a WASP. So if you know anything about Protestants, they go to church like twice a year.
Okay.
And you know, you could say I was a Christian, but what does that even mean? I'm very big into like the whole prodigal son aspect of Christianity. Like you're only whatever religion you are if you've come back to it. Like if you've lived the world, you've had your experience, and then through your own choosing as an adult, so you could say I was born into a Christian household, but the Christian household that I lived in was very hypocritical. And I abhorred hypocrites. Like I said earlier, is that was a big problem I had with my coaches. Like I wasn't willing to, die on the vine for my coaches because they were deplorable. A lot of them were. And so it's the same, like it's the whole hypocrisy thing. So it was kind of cool. I jumped into really studying about the core of consciousness. Like, what is awareness? What is sentience? What is it that actually animates this experience? And I had an old coach that had gotten into meditation, and he went ahead and took me through I think it was a transcendental meditation. And whatever type of meditation was, I was gone. Like within 5 minutes, I was like, woo! And I was like traveling through the astral realm. Like
Amazing.
it was like whatever my being was just waiting for that trigger. And because I had some talent in the ability to kind of bilocate within the ashram world, like within the meditation world that I was being subjected to as a kid in his 20s, I gained very quick favor. It was one of these things of like, ooh, one, a young buck, that was rare.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, it was just the fact that I actually did have some capacity to pattern recognize. And people said I was very intuitive, and I always tried to correct them. I'm like, I'm not intuitive at all. I'm actually hyper observant. I'm hyper vigilant in observance. So I'm still trying to understand what the difference is between the two. But anyway, I did that for a while until once again the hypocrisy of that world reared its ugly head. And I got to see the whole fallacy with the New Age movement.
Nice.
And the one of the things that the New Age movement was really trying to engender, at least with me, was that there isn't evil, that there is not, like, it's good and bad and we're all one and it's monism and yada yada yada. And at a certain level, I do see that, like at a certain level, but we're actually incarnated. And at the level of incarnation, there's boundaries. And the whole thing that level of noise was trying to engender was no boundaries. So therefore, extortion.
You just basically broke down what Brandon and I just talked about, and it hasn't come out yet, but it's going to come out. And by the time this releases, it will already be out. It's going to be episode 55. But we just talked about that. And we just it's go ahead, Brandon, if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because there's a lot of people who talk about good and evil, and if it does it exist, and is there such a thing as evil? And we pretty much broke it down to, on the physical realm, there is good and evil, but then on the spiritual realm, if you're looking at it like as a god or as a creator, it's all part of the plan. So you really can't point to something that's evil. But yes, here in the physical there is, and that's what I was saying about the New Age movement. They try to invert it, and they try to trick you into thinking this physical realm, everything's fine, man. Just meditate all day and it'll be fine. Don't worry about me and your wife going off in the corner or whatever, it's all great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's a high level of spiritual extortion going on. And so I was really lucky that it all crashed around me. Like my right around my first Saturn return, I was thrust into the tropics. I didn't really want to do it, but I was the operations director of an ashram, and we were trying to grow the ashram. So I was more on the business orientation side of it. But I was really frustrated because I had a really cush thing going in Florida, and everything was going really well. And then there was this prerogative to grow the ashram. And so we went ahead and made this land purchase in Costa Rica. And by the time we moved to Costa Rica, within very short order, the whole ashram dissolved. And so I'm left with no money. I had the skill of massage and the skill of yoga and the skill of field goal kicking. And that was it. So I was still a pretty worthless man. And it was great. It was like I had to eat my humble pie. It was like, probably the 10th initiation of my life. And I took it on the chin and essentially dug ditches for 3 years. I lived on an organic farm and just started to learn about the natural world and water and water mitigation and movement, and got into making soil, because for years I was making compost that was like subpar. And then I got into material science because I was like, the stuff that I'm told that I could build with was so chemically laden, and I'm a very chemically sensitive person. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, I know the termites won't eat that, but just me being around it, I'm getting sick. Like, I got to figure this out. So, I just went. Costa Rica was like this massive initiation for me to like really man up and become somebody that was viable. So I learned how to build. I had some construction knowledge from my father, and I did renovations here and there with properties that I owned in Florida. But this was like something like where it was like full on building from the ground up. And I started to get into dome construction just because Costa Rica is notorious for the amount of earthquakes it has. And it's all mud. Like the ground down there is all bauxite clay, so it's this red slippery surface that, like, you can build this huge building that's perfectly built, but if it's post and beam, it turns into a parallelogram in earthquakes. And everybody and everything's on the side of a hill there. Like, it's very rarely you're on flat land, and if you are on flat land, it's because you're in a riverbed. And guess what? That riverbed's going to flood. So it was like, oh my goodness, like there are so many considerations to think of. And that really hardened me. And what was perfect was I was down there during the time where, I guess here in the States, smartphones were hitting the scene. So I completely missed smartphones for like 7 or 8 years.
Did you have a flip phone?
I totally had a flip phone. I had this old Samsung flip phone, and because down there, like I guess, God, internet, we had to drive an hour into town to go to the internet. Like, they had these little internet cafes, and I could only go once a week because driving an hour to town in somebody else's car, you know, and you're on their schedule. So, I mean, I was literally destitute. I didn't have two nickels to rub together. I had skills, but not really like skills like to be to be anything really viable. I mean, here and there, I got to massage like a yoga retreat or whatever, but it was like it was a penance. But I really learned how to live simply, and it kind of got me to my spiritual core of like, I as a being have always loved nature. I've always loved the outdoors, even in Florida where it's very synthetic. And like, I still grew up at a time where my friends and I, we could like ride our bikes to a canal and go fishing, or we could get lost in the woods and stuff like that. We could trap an alligator, like, or we could like kill a snake. Like, it was still like, it was like you had to be alert. Like, the environment was such that it wasn't like you could just go swim in any lake because there might be water moccasins. There was still this wildness to nature. And it was kind of like all of my friends, we all had that more, I guess you would call it, feral attitude in life. And Costa Rica kind of got me to that at the nth degree, because there wasn't any of the conveniences that were in the United States. And I was older and I had to provide and all these other things. So it's just like and like the tropics are hard, man. Monsoon season is tough. And so I just really got into where I feel the most connection and joy is actually being in harmony with my environment. So I don't know what you would call that. I lean on Taoism. I lean on some Christian tenets. I lean on some Hebrew tenets. I lean on some Muslim tenets. I can kind of see the throughput line in a lot of them. But if I'm just checking in, and just like where I feel the most connection is when I'm out in the environment. And I can get into, like, you showed that the card with the knight with the swords and stuff like that. Dude, I can mentally masturbate with the best of them. I can go into that Aquarian fervor of like thought, and just like slice everything up and divide and conquer. And oh, I'm the knight. It's crap. At the end of the day, for me, I like to be in my heart. And being in the heart has a lot to do with getting out of the head and actually feeling. And what I've noticed, one cool thing with meditation was it gave me a greater proprioception. And what I notice is when the energy drops from the mental sphere down into the heart, I become aware of the horizon. It's like the horizon is an extension of my heart. And that, to me, I don't know if you can label that with any spiritual dogma. I don't know if there's any, I maybe, who's to say,
Yeah.
but that's sort of where I'm coming from. And that's where I like to be.
Yeah, we've talked about this on our show before, where like I've said many times, like I've wiped the slate clean on like any indoctrination I've ever been given in a church, or even just by the mainstream or whatever society wants me to think. And so I don't box myself in by saying I'm this or I'm that or this and that and the other, because that makes me into a box. And I'm like, I can't do that, because I don't know tomorrow what I'll learn that's going to make me change my mind about something else. So I'm just open-minded. And Brandon and I like to read the Tao and other books and things like that. So
I completely concur, because if I was to guess the main thing, like the chat GTP of it all, like all the things that they're trying to do, is they're trying to pigeonhole our direct jurisdiction with our creator.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have direct jurisdiction with your creator, you get to create.
Mm-hmm.
And they're scared of that.
Yeah.
They are so scared of the truly unique creators because they can't predict that.
It's
And
not in a box.
I give zero credence to like so much of the noise of all the AI stuff, because when I check it out and when I look at it, I'm like, this is completely uncreative. This is just data sets that are being reduced down to the lowest reduction possible, the most consistent reduction possible. I'm like, this isn't even inventive math. This is absolute garbage. So whatever I've noticed is like when I'm truly in my heart, you cannot predict what I'm going to do or say.
Right.
And that's what they are trying to engineer out of society. They're trying to engineer out of society people's absolute infinite connection to the creator.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can't, like, AI is not connected to source. So
Nope.
it cannot create of its own. Like, people who are connected to source, we living beings, when we're directly connected, we can output something that, like you said, it could be unpredictable, right? But AI can't do that. AI is taking from what other people say and then spitting it out.
Precisely.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like there isn't the they or the them that everybody gets so worked up about. I don't think they have as much control as people that, they give them way too much credit. And I think that a lot of times you have these wild cards that come out of nowhere that are unpredictable that they can't handle. And I mean, the way I look at it now, though, with all these crazy pranks and psyops that they pull, I feel like it's just a good resistance for people like us to wake us up out of our daily lives and get us to create what we're meant here to do. So I kind of try to have gratitude toward that class of people. If anything else, it's helped me a lot, instead of like pointing the finger and freaking out and talking about the documents and all that stuff.
Yeah, we watched a movie called Margin Call last night, and there's this wonderful line in the movie, and it was like when the apex predator, the owner of this bank, for those of you people that haven't seen it, it's a movie about a bank run. Very fitting.
Yeah.
And there's a run on the bank essentially because they are selling tranches of bad mortgages. Very, very fitting. And it's set in 2011. And the apex predator, the CEO of the bank, is talking to his underling. And he was like, there's always going to be people, there's always going to be the whales, and there's always going to be the losers. And then there's always going to be, and he said this, there's always going to be the same percentage. And he says the percentages always stay the same no matter how big the population gets. And it was such this insight. It was such a beautifully said thing. And I don't know if I'm articulating it clearly enough, but the point of it is this is like on a bell curve of whatever, you're going to have people that want to see, and they're at the one side of the bell curve. And then you're going to have, this huge bell in the middle of people that just want to be comfortable. And then you're going to have on the other side of the bell curve, people who don't want to see. And I gave up years ago trying to convince anybody to see anything. It was like in the Bible, Jesus says, if somebody doesn't hear your words readily, dust off your sandals and hit the road.
Exactly.
Like,
pearls to swine.
Yeah, do not cast pearls before swine. And so, and as a younger ego, as a younger man that really wanted to be heard, I noticed I was like, wait a minute, this is me trying to convince myself. I don't need to convince myself of this. So I can just, hey, if somebody wants to hear this, they'll hear it and they'll absorb it. And if they don't, boop, bye-bye.
Absolutely.
Great. But the percentages always stay the same. And that was one of the biggest bullshit things in the New Age movement is like, we're all awakening. Oh, the consciousness. And I'm like, oh my God, no. You guys are just getting high on your own supply. Like literally, the percentages are the percentages are the percentages. The truth of the matter is no. We're all not awake. No, that's not the way it works. Like literally, this is the plane of inertia. This is where souls slow down to get what they want on a material level. That's the only reason why souls are here. And they're here and they're trying to get what they want. And the people that have victim status and victim whatever, guess what? They want that more than victor status. They really do. And then there are people that want to fight the good fight and want to be good, and then you have people that want to be evil, and so we get to watch the whole myriad of these things occur. But like to make these blanket statements of like, oh my god, the consciousness is rising, we're ascending to 4 5D 6D, I'm like, oh, you guys are just stroking yourselves.
Yeah, it reminds me of people who want to save the world, or they're waiting for everybody else to wake up, and I'm like, I don't think that's how this realm functions. I feel like this realm, like you were saying, because the way I put it is I say basically we're all energy, and we're right now in this incarnation, we're being tricked into feeling the physical so we could have free will, so we can make these choices. And it's all really the way I look at it. It's about I guess fixing yourself. You can't really fix the world. It's more about doing your own work, fixing yourself. And then maybe because you raise your vibration or whatever, then you can affect people around you. Maybe that's the only way you can really do it. But I don't think the world is ever really going to be the way we all want it to be, or the people that say they want to change the world that they want it to be, because then there would be no tension. There'd be no resistance. And I feel
Right.
like we would all just fall into the comfortable thing. And, I hear people like talk about resets and stuff like that. So I was thinking, or even something like Sodom and Gomorrah, if you think about that parable or that story in the Bible, where maybe some societies get to a point where so many people are just in that mode of wanting sense pleasure and not growing at all, that some kind of function of this realm happens. There is a reset, and the people who are working on elevating their consciousness or whatever, they're the ones who are spared. And then it kind of just gets recycled, and maybe the souls come back and they get to be the children of the people who saw it. So now they have a better chance than just kind of going along and, super hyper materialism all day.
Yeah, this plane of existence is in perfect balance, and our body is in perfect balance too. So even if it's presenting sickness, that sickness is only presenting because it's actually doing its job. It's actually doing what it needs to eject whatever is causing the disharmony. The physical system that we live in is exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so where I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, before I left Florida, I think in 2006, they were openly stating in the news that they're pumping the aquifer full of poop so that the water pressure would be high enough for all the water purification plants to work. So the logic. So we're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and we're talking about like how a civilization destroyed itself. You literally had city officials going, okay, our water levels are really low. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and throw millions and millions of gallons of black water into the aquifer to raise the aquifer level so then that we could pump it up and clean it, and that'll be fine. That's Sodom and Gomorrah. Like it's not like a lot of these parables and analogies and things like that we're given in these spiritual texts are not far away from our actual existence. And that's what I'm saying. Like for me on the private level, I know when I'm doing something that's in harmony with my surroundings because I get energized. Like if even just taking down dead trees, or like making some biochar, or doing very simple things, there's a reciprocation. It's like the land spirits are like, yeah, you're doing good. But living in cityscapes, it's near impossible to ever receive that reciprocal nature. At least for me, the way I'm designed, I could never receive in a city like Sodom or a city like Fort Lauderdale the requisite energy from my environment to be a viable being.
Yeah. And everyone's in a different place, right? At a different place in their journey. And everyone feels and I guess has different reactions to how the earth is talking to them, or if there's a better way to say it. But I was thinking earlier, you mentioned about intuition, and like you weren't sure how to differentiate between intuition and just noticing patterns. And I'm wondering if like intuition is about also listening to your body. Like is that
I I think I've come to a new understanding of it. Um, I actually had a client that elaborated it perfectly for me so that I could understand it. And the way she said it was like, she explained it this way. She asked me, she goes, "Did you know what you were going to do before you did it?" And I was like, "No, I just did it." And she's like, that's intuition.
mm, okay.
And so there was an action component. There was a no thought, no strategizing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't trust the strategy that my brain comes up with because I've followed tons of strategies. You know, like I said, you know, the sword card with the knight, like, oh my God, pattern, pattern, pattern. Oh, then this. And I've done that and it's crap. And then I've just been in the moment and been flowing and whatever. Like, you know, you guys have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
How shitty are the podcasts where you're like, okay, we're going to cover X, Y, Z, and we're going to do da, 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 and you just don't let the flow occur. It's the same thing with an athlete, where an athlete is like, okay, I'm out on the field, and this guy really likes to do this. He runs the wing. Da, 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 da. You're fucked if you're thinking. Thinking is so overrated, at least for the way I am. So when she said it that way to me, I'm like, oh my God, I've massaged literally thousands of people. If I'm in my head, I am crap.
Mm-hmm.
But if for whatever reason, the environment, the client, we get into the synergy, whatever, and the no thought realm comes, and I'm just finding myself, I'm like, oh, why am I working on this? And I'm like, oh, and then like, how is this? And like, then it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's literally brilliant. So I've had this notion for quite a while. I wrote an essay about it, and it's called the spontaneous genius of God. And I
Yes.
really think,
Channeling.
and
It's
then
like,
I won't call it channeling because channeling infers that you're bringing somebody else in.
oh, okay, okay. I see.
Yeah, I've done channeling. That's
Okay.
not It's not channeling. Because with channeling there's intent.
Okay.
Like, so when you're being spontaneous and this spontaneous genius comes through you, that's literally I think, and this is just the way I'm terming it. I think that's literally when you're in such this harmony with action, the mind drops away, and then the actual true dharma, your true dharma, which means your true work, the reason, the original plan for your body, the highest expression that God wanted for you
Mhm.
comes through.
Nice. Yeah.
And it comes through, and it's always the best. The flow
Yeah.
state, like, I mean, there's books and books and books written about flow state. And flow state is this spontaneous genius where strategy is gone. There is no strategy. You think the guys that survive these fucking squirrel suit flying things are like, woo! They have one strategy and it's to survive. But like in the moment, if you're thinking, you're slow and you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
When I played soccer and tennis, if I was thinking, I was slow and I was dead. Like you don't survive. Life is too fast.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Dr. Callan and I talked about. Is like,
Oh my gosh, I remember that. That
I'm
was
like,
insane.
dude, they talk about all these biochemical reactions that have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Get the fuck out of here. There is no way the
No.
speed of life slows down for
Mm.
all this chemistry to occur. Like that is absolute crap. I don't care. You could have the highest ranked biophysicist sit in front of me and say, "Oh, da, 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 da." Wrong. I don't believe it because I mean, we used to do these videos. Like I've worked for $1 million organizations, like multi-million dollar organizations. They were filming us in 4K in the 90s. They would slow us down to 120 frames per second with every single biomechanical thing that we were doing. I was wearing green dots on my body in 1994 to see the biomechanics of torsional, what do they call it? Torsional acceleration, having my entire body mapped. Dude, my body would react before I even had the input
That's
my
amazing.
environment. So no, we're not this bag of chemicals.
Yeah.
That's a secondary effect of what we give our attention to. It's not the primary.
Yeah. That's awesome. You were talking about massage, and it reminds me of when you were talking about when you would massage people and you could tell if they were like, you could tell if they wanted to die. You could tell if you were massaging an alien. I want to know more about that.
When I was really getting started with my practice in Florida, I was working on very high level athletes. And then the secondary subsect of people I was working on was essentially depressed housewives. I I should say upper middle class to rich housewives. So I would go from these. I had great contrast. I have to say, one of the blessings in my life is I've always been given contrast. And so I think the reason why a lot of people get caught in the way they see things and they're not willing to actually expand, or they get tunnel vision, is because for whatever reason in their life, they actually don't see contrast. They don't see a contrasting input for whatever reason. So I'd work on these pro athletes, and these were young men at the top of their game, crushing, like rich alphas, you know. And I could feel when I'd work on them within my body, I'd be like, oh, I'd become more aware of my body. I become super, like, much more aware than just me, as because I never considered myself a great athlete. I just considered myself to have a strong will because I'm not a great athlete. I'm a 5'9", 185-pound white boy. Like, I'm not a great athlete. But I was around great athletes, and I knew the whatever my function was, and I could perform my function very well because of willpower. But being around hyper athletes like all pros, when you touch them, excuse me, when I would touch them, I became hyper aware of parts of my body. I'd be like, whoa. And I was like, that's what makes them so good, is they have such control. They have such awareness of their physical being. You know, and I'm an Aquarius Pisces cusp. I'm not meant to have extreme awareness of my physical being. That's not the way I am designed. I'm I'm here to have extreme awareness of my environment. But so when I was touching somebody that was in my environment, I was like, holy shit balls. And I'd be so aware. And then I would see like they could correct things if I brought it to their attention just by giving their awareness to it. And then that reminded me, because as a football team, we took a sports psychology class and they taught us the Jacobson's relaxation technique. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't.
No, I don't think so.
You start at your feet and you bring your awareness to your feet and you take a full deep breath. And then you work your way up. And before you know it, like within 10 minutes, you're animating your whole body with breath, but now you have like this higher sensitivity and awareness of your whole body. Well, these uber athletes, they are always at that, but like at a level 10. And I was like, whoa. And then I was around these guys that would have apparently abusive behavior to their bodies, and it had zero negative effects. And I was watching them, and it was like literally in their whole mental mind frame, they didn't have a negative thought about what they were doing. They
Wow.
had zero, like zero resistance within their circuit around these things. And I was like, wow. And then at the same time, I'm reading every Eastern thought book you could imagine. And I was reading this book from Nisargadatta Maharaj, I Am That. And it's like the quintessential book about the mind forming reality. You know, the first hermetic principle.
All is
And at the
mentalism.
same time, I'm massaging these pro athletes that I'm like, wow, like they're pro athletes because they have hyper control and knowingness of their body. And at the same time, their mind isn't inhibiting what their body can do.
Mm.
And then on the other side, the contrast is these neurotic housewives that are miserable, hate their husbands, hate well, let me be clear. They really didn't like themselves. So their projection onto the world was that.
Yeah, exactly.
You can just extrapolate that out.
Yeah.
And they were so neurotic and they couldn't feel anything other than their victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I would work on them and I would get sick. So I'd go for working on these guys. I could work on them all day long. And after like a huge amount of caloric expenditure and have zero problems. And then I'd work on these Karens and I'd be like, ugh, after three of them, vomiting and like, and then I
Oh
tuned
my
into it and
gosh.
I was like, it was after my girlfriend at the time. I got home and I was really sick. I had only had 3 massages and I knew nothing about grounding at the time, by the way. And I got home and I was trying to eat dinner and I was just like, I was ill. I had gained a ton of weight. And I was just like, oh, like, and then I just dropped in and I could feel this one particular client. And I was I was just asking my body, I was like, what is this? What is this? What is this? And I got to the core of it and it was like, I want to die. I want to die. And then I checked in again because I was an avid meditator at the time. And I was like, oh, this isn't my thought. This is so
Wow.
and so's thought. And I
Wow.
was like, and then I like came up and out of it. And I was like, my body was animated again and I wasn't sick.
Wow.
And
Wow.
this is where I really became aware of sympathetic resonance. I had been working on these women and I was in sympathy with them, not empathy.
Mm. Mm.
Well, this totally launched my deep dive into sympathetic resonance, or what's known as sympathetic vibratory physics. So, in very short order, I was exposed to the work of John Worrell Keeley. I was like exposed to Victor Schauberger, Nikola Tesla, all these like paramount giants of science at the turn of the 20th century that have essentially taken all the hermetic processes and mechanized them. So the law of correspondence, as above, so below, like they had mechanized them and made beautiful machines. They could replicate it. They were avid experimenters and they all shared this whole notion of harmony, resonance, like all the words you would use with music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in Florida, I had no way to ground out the noise I would take. And noise in this, I'm defining as the negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'd work on a Karen and she was, completely in her victimhood as a young man, I didn't even know what any of that meant. I would just take it. I would be the grounding rod for it. And once I learned what that was, I got into grounding. And then oddly enough, I was taking the route of building earth bag buildings, building with cob, building rammed earth structures and stuff like that. So it was awesome when I moved to Costa Rica, because then I would, maybe twice or three times a week go massage people. But then on my other days, I was building my house, and my hands were always like my feet. Like, if people don't know what cob construction is, it's literally you take clay, you make it wet, you mix a natural fiber into it, and then with your bare feet, you mash it.
Nice.
I mean, I did
Grounding.
that for thousands of hours a year. And so from that point on, I never, ever had a problem with massaging. I could massage anybody. In fact, in high season, I would massage up to 8 people a day and not feel a blip from it. And so it was kind of cool because I moved back to the States and I totally forgot the whole thing with grounding. I start working on people here and then I get sick again. I was like, and just like an idiot, I was just like, I wonder what's going on. I was like, oh man, I haven't been grounding. So even in the cold, like today it was 27 degrees out, and I was like, no, I'm getting my bare feet on the ground. I'm gonna walk in the sun and get that ground current going. You asked about the alien. So by alien, I just want to be specific.
Yes, please.
Alien means a consciousness that's not endemic to this plane of existence.
Okay.
So I don't believe in rocket ships going to, all terrorists and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm much more of a hermetic principle guy. Like, frequency is location. This plane of existence is an amalgamation of a very certain frequency range. So when you come across an alien per se, it could be from a different dimension. So I was working on this woman and she called herself Z. And there was a yoga retreat and she had a guru. She was like the assistant to the guru. And that was a position that I had once held. So I knew what it was energetically. But what I was watching in her was like nobody was actually there for the guru. I noticed that she was the one that was actually holding the energy in the room. And I was like, and she was this like little diminutive, like she was like maybe 90-pound white girl. And the guru was like this huge strapping black guy with like these big, pretty famous guru at the time with these big flowing dreadlocks. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, everybody thinks they're here for him. No, they're here for her. So they had hired me to work on everybody, and she was the last person I got to work on. And I'm about 15 minutes in, and I'm like, the way I'm reading her body is like what I'm touching on the physical level isn't the person I'm dealing with.
It's bizarre.
And I'm working on her. And just out of nowhere, this is an intuitive thing because I didn't have a strategy. Intuitively, I asked her, I go, where do you call home? And she, like, that being instantly was like,
You know.
And she's like, well, it's hard to explain. I go, try me. I'm like, I've been exposed to a lot of things. And she was like, it's a space in between spaces. And I was like, oh, you're interdimensional. And she's like, and that's why I could feel her, because the interdimensional beings, because they're not from this dimension, they don't feel, it's like if you were to go to like an all black chorus in Harlem and they're singing and you would see like one white person in the chorus, they don't fit. Like it just doesn't fit. So interdimensional beings, energetically, they don't fit here. And that's exactly why they come. They actually come here to like create a siphon or be a projector, one of the two, but they're not neutral. Because most, I would say the majority of us that are supposed to be here, we're actually neutral to the dimension that we're in. So anyway, I'm working on her, and now that I know that she knows, and she knows that I know, like the whole energetics of the system opened up, and I was like, whoa. And she's like, you have the most phenomenal heat.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, I'm very rajasic. I have a lot of pitta. And she's like, do you mind if I just absorb your heat? And so I literally was just touching her with the fingertips at the base of her neck. Next thing I know, an hour has passed and I'm in the same position. And she's like, that was wonderful, everything. And that was it. That was the whole thing. She just wanted to sample, as far as I could tell, the pitta, the aspect of internal fire from my being. That's what she wanted to experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was complete. Now that was an interdimensional being. So that was one type of alien per se that you could say I worked on. And she had a physical body. She just had this walk-in. I think, I mean, I've had walk-ins come into me, and walk-ins are usually some sort of consciousness, some sort of entity that will enter a physical body that's been evacuated.
Evacuated in what way?
There's so many different ways. Usually some sort
Oh
of
my.
trauma,
Okay.
some
Wow.
sort of trauma. It
Would
also can
that
happen. It can also happen from remote viewing. So if you bilocate, if you don't know how to protect your physical body when you bilocate, you could have a walk-in when you come back. Because there's a principle in nature. Nature abhors a vacuum.
yeah.
There's never a time that you're going to have an empty space that isn't going to get filled. So
Wow.
depending on what your frequency range is, your trauma history, the continuum of your consciousness, which is the soul, there's so many different variables that will determine how that will play out, that you can't make a generalization. But one great axiomatic thing in nature is nature abhors a vacuum. So that's why I got out of the world of channeling. I got out of the world of remote viewing. I got out of the world of bilocating, because it created tons of tags within my body.
Wow. So like that makes me wonder, like when people are say like someone is possessed, would you like use that terminology for it?
Oh yeah, I've worked on possessed people,
Was
and
Z one of those?
I've worked on two people that literally did not have their own consciousness. They were being dominated by the secondary presence that was within their body.
Oh my. Was Z one of those people that
Yeah.
you would say possessed? No, she was just
No, there wasn't her consciousness. Who knows who the original woman was? The presence I was working with, there was no resistance in her body. A possession is usually there's a resistance, whatever the continuum of the soul is that ingratiated itself into that particular physical body. With the possessions, I've only been around two of them. There was a resistance to that secondary soul being there.
mm,
And so the primary soul was still around, and it was trying to get in. And the
Mm.
secondary soul actually just had dominion over that body for that period of time.
Wow.
With Z, she wasn't there. This was the consciousness of this interdimensional.
Wow.
Yeah.
And would you say Z was a like a positive energy or a negative, sorry, entity, or like negative or neutral, or like I know you used the word neutral a different way too earlier, but what would you say she was?
For me, she was a positive influence because at that point in my life, I was really, really researching and really like I was into guru busting because I had my own bad experience with the guru. And
Hmm.
when I say I had a bad experience, what I mean was I had externalized the authority
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
such an extent, and it was promoted by the guru.
Mm.
Um, and at that time, I don't feel this way because I'm much more mature now. But at that time, I felt like I was victimized.
Hmm.
So I had anger and I wanted to like destroy gurus, because they did it to me, the
Hmm.
enemy out there. I wasn't sufficiently mature yet. She came at the perfect time because I got to see, no, whoever the being was, whoever that body was, there can be this experience and have it be lovely. Like that soul needed to leave. It reminded me of the movie K-Pax. You ever see that Kevin Spacey movie called K-Pax?
Yeah, a
Haven't.
long time ago.
So there's this being that drops into Kevin Spacey's body, and it's this highly traumatized guy, and he needs this quote unquote alien presence to be in his body to help him resolve,
Hmm.
as he himself can't resolve it.
Hmm.
So this quote unquote alien drops into his body and does all these things and makes all these connections for him for the people in his environment because it's terrain theory. So that the terrain changes enough to unlock the trauma so that he can heal.
Wow.
It's a brilliant movie, and it was very underrated. And like I bring it up to a lot of people. Are like, "What movie? Oh, Kevin Spacey's a creep."
Spell
But
it.
Yeah.
Spell the name of the
K
movie.
Pax,
Okay.
and so in with Z, I had zero negative experience with her. Now I had a secondary, what I would call alien experience, and that was very odd because it was a completely different thing.
Hmm.
The one thing I really want, and I try and impart this in my own podcast and anytime I communicate, life is specific. So this is where like, knowing your grammar and like really like being specific with terms and like delineating things is very important. It's a fool's errand to generalize about this stuff. So even though I consider both of these consciousnesses alien, they were totally different. And the second woman I worked on, she I get a call from this brand new retreat center, and it was like the second retreat that they were having, and I think they just called me because their massage therapist had bowed out, and the woman was at her wit's end, and she's like, "Can you come and fill in? We have these massages." I'm like, "Sure." And I get there, and there's this really quirky woman, like just watching the way she was moving and like watching the way she was interacting with people. I was like, and then I didn't know anyone there. It was like a brand new place. And so I'm just trying to get my bearings and whatever. So I just go in, set up the table. We start working, and she's just weird. She's just like, and I'm just seeing her as just a weird old bird. Like I didn't know what was going on. And um once again, I'm just like, I keep asking because I'm always wanting to know the truth, so I just ask the question, I just ask it. I'm just like, what is this? What am I experiencing? Like, what is actually happening here? Why am I reacting this way? Like, I'm constantly internally auditing. And so I'm going through that with this woman. And once again, just out of nowhere, um, just out of nowhere, I just said, "Oh, it's your first time here."
I remember you saying that on your podcast.
Dude, her whole body, the second I said that, I had no strategy. This wasn't like, oh, I calculated this. It was just this intuitive blurt. Oh, this is your first time here. She instantly relaxed.
Insane.
All of the quirkiness, her personality, everything just settled. And I was like, we didn't communicate about it. And then I could see her. I could see what she was before this life. And it was very much like, not from the cat eye thing of Avatar, but she was this blue bodied being.
Crazy.
And just like 8 months before, I had been visited. My friend and I, we were on a peyote trip, and we were visited by this
Blue
blue
being.
being up in the tree, and I was just like, whoa. And it was like,
Wow.
we saw it. We both saw it. So it wasn't a hallucination. It was
Yeah.
like we were in that frequency range.
Yeah.
And with peyote, they say that the blue deer, they call it the blue deer. Like when you've been visited by the blue deer, that's when you're fully in the medicina of the peyote.
Mm.
And I didn't see a blue deer, but I saw this blue man. So when I saw this blue being of hers, I actually was tickled inside, because I was like, okay, because I had such a wonderful experience with the peyote.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually felt the alkalinity in my system the second I did that, because that's what peyote brings. It brings full alkalinity into your system if you do the buttons. And so I actually felt that looking at her, and I was like, oh, so cool. So we had this nice experience. We didn't talk that much. She was effusive with her praise afterwards. She ended up being really cool for the rest of the retreat. But what was funny was, I get a call from the owner of the retreat center, and she's like, "Did you tell my client she was an alien?" And I go, "Well, first of all, it's client,
Yeah.
it's patient, privilege. Whatever I say to somebody in a session is just between the two of us, unless I have permission to talk about it." And I gained a lot of credibility with the retreat owner. As soon as I said that, she like backed off, and she was like, "Oh, okay, I get it." And we became great friends, and she was at my wedding and all this stuff. Her and her husband have been really good friends of mine since then.
The
But it
retreat
was like
lady or the blue being lady?
the retreat owner. It was just really cool, because it was just like, she's like, yeah, whatever you said to her, like, she told me what I didn't agree to, I didn't say what I was,
Yeah.
said exactly. She was like, yeah, she started to tell everybody that you said this was her first time here. And this is the reason why she's been so awkward in all these things. And I have to tell you, Topher, she's like, she really chilled out. And I'm like, yeah, could you imagine? It's like, people going, oh, you're white, you're black, you're Hispanic. No, I'm not any of those. I'm a fucking alien. Because that's the way it would feel to her.
Right.
And so this is kind of cool, because I've never remembered a past life.
Okay.
But I know people that remember past lives.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually been around people that are accessing a past life or a future life in real time.
Oh my gosh.
And know know to balls to bones that they're not lying, that it's a real thing. And but myself, I've never remembered a past life or anything like that. But I had all these people telling me, because I was sensitive, that, oh, you're an old soul. And then all the bullshit astrologers that talk about Pisces, and they're like, oh, you're at the end of the zodiac, you're an old soul. And I'm like, oh, so all Pisces are, old soul people? Like, give me a fucking break. That's not true. And my wife, she is like, she's triple Pisces, by the way, for
Wow.
real. She's like, no, you're not an old soul at all. This is your first go here. And I'm like, and she's like, that's why you're here, for morale. Like, you're like, you have more faith than anybody I've ever been around. It's because you just came from that realm. And as soon as she said that to me, I was like, that makes so much sense. Because I'm like, I don't remember any past lives, but I don't have any doubt that that is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that the majority of my life, the majority of my role is just to like pump people up, get them fired up. So
I just got here, y'all.
Let's do it. Yeah. I like it. You don't have any of
yeah,
that indoctrination or cynicism carried over.
Yeah.
You're like a
right.
child.
Exactly. And I am like a child. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been so naive. What I've judged myself so much in is like, I've been so naive in my life. I've like, that's the biggest thing I've had to do, has been like, let go of the naivety. Like, and I mean, that's why the whole new age thing was so appealing to me at the age that I was when I was exposed to it. Cause it was like, it's all good. It's all, like, and they get completely fleeced from it. When I say completely fleeced, that's an exaggeration. I'm not a victim in any of this. But like, when my wife said that to me, it hit me, and I was like, you're right. I'm a newbie. And that's probably why I could understand the blue one, or I could
The blue
understand the
beam.
movie, because there was a resonance. And that's also why I could actually resonate with the interdimensional being, because as a newbie, like, whenever you're new to anything, you're an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
And my life has literally been, my entire life, I'm an outsider. Like, in middle school, the school I went to, I was like one of four goys in the entire school. It was a Jewish prep school. So I go from the middle school to a public school, where now at the public school, everybody thinks I'm rich because I came from a Jewish prep school. And then I go out of state to a university in Michigan, and like, I'm the Florida boy around all these Michiganders, which is like alien.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I'm a kicker. Like, as a kicker, you're an alien on your own team. Then, like, everywhere I've been, I'm like literally the outsider. I'm just on the edge, and I'm there to like see it and like perceive it, and then like rally the troops. But that's really it. Like, that's the role of my, I really think that's a great way of encapsulating the dharma that expresses itself through me.
Wow. Have you ever heard of the law of one?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you think about that when you heard about it? Does it make any connections for you with like the entities that you met in these bodies who were like foreign to us, but yet could be like you said, interdimensional?
It's been a long time since I've actually read the law of one. It's been about 17 years. From what I could remember of it, and I'm paraphrasing it, it really like teetered on the whole monism level of things, which I don't find appropriate for this plane of inertia that we're on. I think this particular frequency range that we're on, the souls that incarnate here are here to learn boundaries.
Okay.
Oh,
So
I love
there
that.
is there is truth in monism. if you understand that that's not this frequency range.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
So all like a lot of the extracurricular things that are occurring in this dimension are other frequency ranges trying to penetrate and come in. I think there's a lot of credence that the trauma cycles that are engendered in this plane of inertia are engendered by what we would call an alien energy. And by alien energy, it's an interdimensional energy that's siphoning energy from here. Because the number one thing that we have is our attention. The most valuable commodity in all of the universe is human attention.
Where
I
your
mean,
attention goes, energy flows.
in spades. In fact, I really think a lot of the physical existence is solely here because of our attention. Like I don't think things are as like quote unquote as solid as they'd be. Like earlier we were talking about the zodiac. Well, we didn't bring up zodiac. I just had it in my mind. But
Yeah, I want to though. So if you want to start bringing it up, I'm cool.
we're so have you ever seen how a hologram works?
I think so.
So the cool thing with a hologram is every aspect of a hologram has the whole of the hologram encapsulated in it. So you could say our body is a biophysical hologram, and it encapsulates the entirety of the realm within it. And that's known as like the zodiac man or the zodiac woman. So when you look at the stars, what we call stars, they're just luminaries. Those luminaries, you could say, are at the vertical perimeter of your awareness. That's as far as your awareness is going to go. That's as far as it can go. And then you can't see what's, subterranean. You can only imagine what's subterranean. And if you really start to dig into what you experience, you start to understand that everything that you experience is in front of you. So even if you're looking at a mirror that's looking behind you, that's still in front of your consciousness. So you're literally in a hall of mirrors. That's how a fucking hologram works.
Wow.
So the zodiac man or woman is the snapshot of you in space and time at the time of birth. You can also do a snapshot of you in space and time at the time of conception. I liked human design a lot because what it did, it says, okay, when you were born, that's your ego, but 88 days before you were born, this was your original program. This is when the soul entered the body. I actually think that has some merit, but I don't think it's the whole of it. What's really neat, because earlier we were talking about contrast. You can only really know something if you have contrast. So I've been experimenting with looking at people's conception chart, the zodiac man or woman at their conception, relative to the zodiac man or woman at the time of their birth. And when you have the contrast of the two, you get the Venn diagram of that being. You know what I'm saying? It's like if I was to take a snapshot of the profile of your right side, I don't know what your left side looks like. And if I take the snapshot of your left side, I don't know what the right side looks like. So how do we get a whole vision of what a being is? You need at least two sides. And this is also how hologram works. So within this holographic reality, the zodiac, we'll call it the composite zodiac man or woman of you at the time of your conception, which is that's really when I think the soul collapses in, and life begins. That's my take on it. And then when you inspire, when you take your first breath, like in the yoga world, like when you inspire, that's a sign of your will. So from the time that bam, your parents, you had the let's just call it the sympathetic resonance to vibrate you into existence, and then from the time that you inspire, those two contrasting elements, then bam, that gives you a good picture of a being. And this is a free will realm that completely doesn't mean that you are locked into what that zodiacal diagram is actually saying. And by zodiac, that's like the zoo in the sky. What most people know of the zodiac is the plane ecliptic, where the sun travels in the solar arc, the 13-mile solar arc over your head. It travels through 13 constellations. And there are 13 constellations. From an astronomical perspective, there are 13 constellations on the plane ecliptic.
Is the Ophiuchus the other one?
Yes. Yes. And it's been in the visible sky for 500 years. So for people to say it's new, it's kind of stupid. But it makes Ophiuchus is like it just throws everything out of balance, because Ophiuchus is Jesus. Ophiuchus is the healer. It's the wisdom tamer. Ophiuchus is that which encapsulates and knows the whole zodiac. And so that's why 13 has been demonized for so long, because it also represents the moon cycles and how the phasic nature of life, because that's why the moon and all the lore behind the moon has been demonized also in the Western world, is because it's very feminine. Like any of us dudes, when we look at women for real, we're like, man, you guys are like a different species. It's not a dig either. It's you women are so phasic. You're so like, you can't help but be more in the moment because you're so much more attached to your physical cycles. Dudes can just grin and bear it. No, for real. And
yeah, 100%.
It detaches us from our sensitivity. But any man that's close to a woman, you cannot deny the fact that they're just more sensitive and go through more shit. It's exactly the way the moon is. So that's why the paternal, the patriarch, and I don't have a negative context against men or the pater or the father, but let's just call it the controlling psychopathic elite that have kind of brainwashed all of humanity. They were like, okay, you're only going to look at the solar influence of life, and we're going to disconnect it from the actual we're going to disconnect it from nature. We're going to say, okay, all these constellations are the same size, so all the zodiac signs are the same size, and they're all equal, and there's only 12 of them, and that divides into 360 perfectly at 30 degrees, and hey, we're all good. It's like, that lie that has 80% truth in it. That's exactly what like the sun sign horoscope, way of things is. It does have a lot of truth in it. You just have to go a little bit deeper into it. And the real thing is we are attached to nature. We are holotropic in nature. So we are this little, like, we're animated and bioenergetically moving and doing our thing, but that is mirrored as above, so below. That's mirrored in these quote unquote, stellar luminaries. And so part of my journey into knowing my environment has been getting to know the luminaries and know their apparent influence. It's not really an influence, it's a corollary.
Like a reflection.
Not even a reflection, it's a corollary. So this gets into the whole notion of like knowing how light actually works.
Please enlighten us.
Because we're taught that light is photons. It's particulates moving very, very fast. that somehow, some way allow the visible light spectrum to occur. That's not light at all. Light doesn't move. Light is an effect of an energetic connection. So if you could imagine everything that you're aware of, everything that you're visibly looking at, the reason why you're aware of it is because your eyes, the being that is behind your eyes, the being that's actually looking and aware of the senses, has a direct energetic connection with everything that you are looking at. There is nothing that you can be aware of. Like, imagine out of the quadrillions, I mean, I'm talking about infinite amount of things that you could be aware of right now. How is it that you're only aware of what you're aware of right now?
Experience?
No, that's what you're having is an experience. The point is for you to be aware of it, you're animating it. And that animation process appears to be light.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I think my mind just exploded. Kind of goes back to if a tree falls in the woods, does it actually fall if no one sees it, kind of thing.
Right. And really, though, I always try and point people to the thing is like, have you realized, like really realize, not just think about it, that everything that you've ever experienced has happened in front of you? You've never experienced anything. Nothing has ever happened behind you, ever. Even if you feel something behind you, that's still in front of your consciousness. You are the fourth wall.
I wanted to ask you about that, so I'm glad you brought it up.
All right, everybody. That was part one of our lovely discussion with Christopher Gardner. You can find more of him at topherhq.com. Let me make sure that's right. Yep, topherhq.com or BioCharisma on Instagram. All the links are below. And you can find more of us, The Over Sharon Show, at morelawsmoreproblems.com. Click on the Over Sharon tab, and we have links to our YouTube there. We have links to our Podbean and everywhere where you can listen to our lovely voices and amazing discussions. We will see you next Thursday night at 8:33 p.m. with the premiere of part 2 of this mind-blowing discussion. We'll see you later. Oh, and shout out to the chat. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. We always say the best way to support us, if you'd like to support us, is to come here every Thursday night, hang out in the chat, or just comment and thumbs up, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you have any questions for Sharon and I, please let us know, because we do plan on working on a follow-up episode of episode 55, where it was just Sharon and I talking. And so if you have any questions, please leave them in this video or wherever you can find us. And until next week, sweet dreams, everybody.